Hey there everyone! The Kiba episode was super exciting, and we're bouncing from that to Shino. There have been a lot of art contributions lately for the various characters. I have an updated version of Neji by K Karma in Discord, and of course the previous contributions by Crazy Star and Zetails. And more to come, apparently. Things are really shaping up for the updated models on all the characters, and I just can't wait to see them. I'm going to make you listen to my 10 seconds of asking for likes, comments, and subs, and of course, remember to join the Discord from the link in information below. We have a lot to get through as always, so let's just jump right in. Looking down at her plate, Ino's surprised that she's grabbed more meat so far than Choji. Being a Jonin now, Shikamaru had less time, far less time, to socialize than his recently returned classmates. For whatever reason, Minato was delaying missions for the returned kids. Only Rock Lee had been sent out on missions, though no one was exactly sure why. Shikamaru had shared some of Lee's mission results as well, that they were far exceeding expectations. Wherever he had gone to train in this time, he had clearly gained something substantial along the way. Ino was concerned that she wasn't getting sent out because she was a Jinchuriki. Maybe the scare of her disappearance convinced Lord Fourth that she needed to stay in the village from now on. Interrupting her brooding, Choji remarks that her appetite is way bigger than he remembers. She used to be so focused on her figure. Shrugging, she tells him that the occasional possessions from her tailed beast burns off extreme volumes of energy. She can afford to eat whenever she wishes and however she wishes. Possessions? Choji asks her how often that's happened to her in her absence. Swallowing a mouthful of food, Ino pauses and counts on her fingers before telling him that she's probably been possessed 8 or 9 times in the time she's been gone. But things are different with Isobu now. She won't be possessed anymore. Isobu? Choji asks, confused. Oh, that's the Sanbi's name, Ino explains casually, spooning another mouthful of food. You named it? Choji asks, almost laughing at the absurdity of naming a monster. I didn't name it. That was always its name. Long before me, anyway. Ino tells him, almost offended on behalf of the Sanbi. But what about your figure? Aren't Akimichis supposed to be chunky? Or are you slimming down for a girl you like? Putting a hand on his stomach, Choji quietly contemplates her question before... She's no longer with us. And she never knew what I looked like fat. I'm sure she wouldn't have cared. Oh, sorry, Choji. Ino apologizes, remembering that no matter how much she's been through, Choji's been through an entirely different set of hellish circumstances. In fact, compared to his, her little adventure felt like a walk in the park. There was a lot of turmoil, and many people died. I did what I could, but I was unable to save her from it. Choji mutters, his voice darkening a little. Instead of concerning myself with relationships, I just wait for the day that I can exact my revenge on that corrupted sage, Pain. But I'd rather talk about you, Choji says, trying to divert the subject. You find anyone that you like? Wait, Choji? Ino mutters, pushing her plate aside so she can lean closer to him. You met the Pain? A few times, Choji answers, face twisting with disgust. But I don't want to talk about it right now. You're dodging my question. Did you find anyone that you like? Well, actually, yeah, Ino admits bashfully. But it probably won't work out after all is said and done. Too much is happening out there in the world right now. I'm not going to get in its way by thinking about relationships. What does that mean? Choji asks before someone lands just outside the window and leans on the frame to look at them. Kakashi-sensei. Ino? Choji? Kakashi greets kindly. I'm about to head out for a long retrieval mission. It'll be about a month before I see you again. Giving Kakashi a good luck, Choji and Ino return back to their food, but he remains leaning on the window frame. Breaking the silence, Kakashi tells them that he thought they deserved to know where he was going, given the circumstances. Looking up at Kakashi's teasing, Choji and Ino wonder what he's trying to imply. "I'm going to the land of lightning," Kakashi explains. "Now that people are returning from the war with the land of water, there's a lot of movement with their homeless situation." "Well, that's charitable of us," Ino remarks, wondering why Kakashi, of all people, is being sent for that. "Well, that's not why I'm going," Kakashi grins, his smile imprinting through his mask. "Keep this between your classmates for now, but we've finally found Hinata." Nearly choking on his food, Choji coughs and splutters in surprise. Of all of their classmates that went missing, it was surmised that, more than likely, Kiba, Neji, Hinata, and Sasuke had been killed. Kiba because he vanished mysteriously. The other three because of their heavily sought-after abilities. "I'm being sent to retrieve her," Kakashi clarifies to the two stunned genin. Before they can raise any questions, he ducks from the window and vanishes. Leaping from their seats, the two dash outside. Ino glances to a rooftop to see Kakashi's back as he quickly leaps away. Signaling for Choji to follow, Ino leaps up the wall of the building and sprints to catch up to Kakashi. Looking behind, she notices that Choji has fallen behind, but she can't afford to let Kakashi leave the village quite yet. As she gets within eye shot of the gates, she figures she needs to boost her speed even more, but just as she's about to, she looks at the ground below and sees Choji standing at the gate, waiting for her and Kakashi to get there. Wonder fills her thoughts for a moment before she snaps back to the situation at hand. Landing on Kakashi's other side, the two flank and completely stop him. Acting surprised, Kakashi turns and wonders what they're after. A retrieval mission to an allied nation is nothing. Surely the Hokage will let me and Choji go as well, Ino asks, restless about their situation. "Lord Forth said you might be interested," Kakashi tells them. "He told me to tell you about it just in case you were interested in going." Eyes lighting up at the suggestion, Ino tells Kakashi to wait so she can run home and grab her gear. Choji does the same. When they return to the gates, Neji is standing there as well, nodding at their arrival. The likelihood of trouble in this mission is next to zero, so if you're looking for action, this isn't the mission for you, Kakashi tells the three of them. The Hokage only thought that you'd want to stretch your legs, and maybe see Hinata that much sooner. She'll want her friends with her on the trip home. Kakashi nods at them as they affirm their positions and signals for them all to move out. It all felt like it happened so quick. Shino had sent all of his bugs to surround the bearded rock ninja and keep him away from Lord Orochimaru. Swarming him to sap him of chakra didn't seem to be doing anything. At least, if it was, he hadn't shown any signs of fatigue. For now, he could obscure the man's vision by erecting a veritable wall of bugs around him. At least that way, he wouldn't be able to attack the girls at range. But just as the wall formed, the man completed his jutsu and reality collapsed in on Shino. Everything turned to black for just a moment before dumping Shino back into reality, and he fell 10 feet to the ground. Sending out his chakra signal, Shino shook his head in annoyance that yet again he was without bugs, just like when he fought Gaara in the Chunin exams. Whatever just happened separated him from his bugs. Looking around, he at least assessed that he was in a jungle. That much was obvious. Somehow he had been teleported from Iwa, but how far? He would need either a vantage point or a map to have any hint of where he ended up. Just ahead of him was a break in the trees and a large, loud, rushing river. The water is muddy and opaque, and when Shino looked upriver, he saw a massive object sitting in the water. The flow was nearly completely blocked, and the overflow sprayed out around both sides of the object, creating flooding in the trees around the river. Shino was uphill a bit, and the flooding diverted back to the river proper before reaching him. And most definitely, this heavily churning water was caused by the odd blockage. Finally focusing properly on the massive object, Shino's head slowly tilted further and further back as he stared up at the creature. If he didn't know any better, he'd call it a bug. except it was larger than all other animals. Its head twitched and jerked at the top of its body, many times higher than the surrounding trees. Twitching its head on a downward angle, the giant monster seems to look straight at Shino, but he didn't think it possible. He was as small as an ant compared to the monster. There was no way that it would notice him as he stared blankly back at it. "Oh," Shino said as the monster leaned forward and stamped one of its giant arms into the ground where he had been standing, as if it were itself just swatting at a fly. Leaping away at the last second, Shino barely dodged the strike. However, the simple shockwave of the hit threw him dozens of feet into other trees in the jungle. His arm was still broken from Naruto's fox rage, which slowed him some from escaping the blast. Wheezing for breath, Shino looked up as another arm came smashing down at him. This time he escaped to freedom at a hair's breadth, but yet again the shockwave sent him hurtling through the air. On the third time that he recoiled, the monster struck at him yet again, able to somehow hone in on his exact location through the foliage. He was already too injured from the first two strikes that he could not react in time, and so this strike finally came down upon him. Waking in the cover of a cloth hut, Shino tried to move, but his whole body screamed in pain at him. Truly, not a single inch of his body was without pain as he writhed for comfort. So distracted by pain, Shino did not notice the small child that was kneeling on the edge of his bed and leaning in to get a super close look at him. When the child realized that Shino was awake, he grinned, exposing a nearly toothless smile. Though Shino tried to get the kid to back up some, the kid seemed to lean in ever closer. His arms shook when he tried to use them, and there was nothing he could do to get some space. Soon after, though, a man entered the tent with a bowl of mush and sat down where the child was, pushing the kid to go outside. "Bugs!" the man told him simply, scooping a spoonful of ground-up bugs and bringing it towards Shino. "Eat!" Shaking his head, Shino tried to tell the man that he came from a clan that befriended bugs. He made a point to not eat them. "No, no," the man repeated, waving the spoon in Shino's face again. "Eat the bugs!" "I can't," Shino refused, keeping his lips sealed. The man shouted a couple hoarse words at the door of his tent, and suddenly 4 more men came in. Before Shino can ask what was going on, the men surround him, hold him down, and force his mouth open. Too much pain racked his body, and Shino couldn't resist them as the medicine man proceeded to dump bugs into his mouth. One of the men forced his mouth shut as the group started chanting for him to swallow. Remarkably, in this moment, the taste of the bugs was the least shocking part of the ordeal, as Shino screamed from behind closed teeth for the answers that none of them were interested in giving him. After a long time of struggling, Shino eventually and accidentally swallowed some of the bugs, and when he began to gag in rejection of the act, the men poured water on his face. In desperation to escape the waterboarding, Shino forced down the remaining bugs so he could properly scream protest. When they realized he had swallowed the bugs, they stopped dumping water on him and let him catch his breath. But before Shino knew it, the medicine man grabbed another spoonful of bugs and started the struggle all over again. Every day, Shino went through this horrible ritual. Eventually, he decided to agree to just eat the stupid bugs, because at the end of the day, they had already been killed. He had to swallow his pride in the short term so he could get back home in the long term. When he finally showed them that he was willing to participate, they stopped holding him down. Eventually, he even ate the bugs with his own hands, to keep the stubborn and forceful men at bay. It was on this day, when he was eating them of his own volition, that he was visited by another from this strange village. A teenager, not much older than himself. The boy tells Shino that he is the son of the leader of the village. He also apologized for the medicine man and his forcefulness, but there was a reason behind it all. It meant the difference between survival and destruction. Shino's body needed to be infused with the bugs' essence so that the village would be safe. Obviously, this information was not enough, and Shino told the boy to start from the beginning. The teenager told Shino that the great big bug that had attacked him is a god to bugs. This god does not smite down the weak, and in fact seemed in alliance with all the different kinds of bugs in these parts. They believed that the essence within the bugs was a sort of identifier to them, and through dangerous trial and error, they learned that the bug god ignored them if they had enough bug essence inside of them, almost as if they tricked the bug god into thinking they were bugs themselves, and therefore friendly to it. In this way, they were able to live in startling proximity to the bug god, and it was not going to destroy them. You could go from a pest to the bug god to a tiny little friend. Shaking his head, Shino's surprised that they weren't force-feeding him as a form of torture. They needed his quote-unquote essence to be cloaked so that the bug god wouldn't zero in on him and destroy their village as a consequence. Perplexed, Shino wondered what they meant by essence. The boy told him that all living things have an essence. It's invisible, not dissimilar to energy. Nodding, Shino noted inwardly that what they referred to as essence may also be chakra. But Shino had never heard of gaining the quality of whatever it was you ate. Then again, he never ate one animal ritualistically before to find out. Shino apologized to the boy for being resistant, but if they had just explained this to begin with, he would not have been so combative. Laughing, the boy told them that they were essentially exiled from their civilization because they insisted everyone had an essence that identified them. They were lambasted and ostracized for the suggestion and eventually split off to form their own village. Their civilization was under constant threat of the bug god, so everyone had been charged with coming up with new ideas to help protect against its wrath. Some ideas were shot down, but their suggestion that there was this invisible energy inside them all that the bug god could more or less smell was more than hogwash to the civilization. Shino told him that where he was from, he believed essence was called chakra, but it was far more than a concept to them. They had long ago learned how to weaponize it and use it for day-to-day chores. Shaking his head, the boy told Shino that they don't want to learn about that. Their people aren't very accepting of things, clearly, so if they learned that they could use this same power from within for violence, there'd be tyrants rising up all over the place. As it was, they were living a life of otherwise quiet peace since no one dared to come to the grounds of the bug god. They discovered that when they ate enough of any specific animal, that animal's essence seemed to mix with theirs, and they could suddenly hunt that animal much easier. This was what led to their initial discovery. A hunting party that primarily ate venison went out to the plains to hunt deer and realized that they could get 10 times closer than a beginner. Some skill was involved, certainly, but it was almost as if the deer had to visually realize that the experienced hunters were human before they sped off to safety. Upon further experimentation, they eventually learned that this was true for all animals, including bugs. And so they ate bugs every single day in great amounts to keep themselves safe from the bug god. A small price to pay. But the bug god had not always been around, only for the last few generations. And that was all it took to radically alter the creatures in its vicinity. They did not have to consume an equal portion of bugs that they did venison in the previous example, almost as if these bugs had more essence in them. And the same was true for how this overflowing essence affected them. In fact, all of the animals had slowly, over the last 100 years, mutated, and were now far different than their predecessors. If anything, it made everything far more dangerous. Beetles that were once the size of his palm were now the size of large dogs. Some ants were able to spray acid strong enough to burn through an entire fallen log. There were flies that were not only immune to fire, but became ignited by it when threatened. Even some moths were able to create illusions with the dust from their wings. The so-called normal bugs that they ate were dwindling in population due to these fierce and newly developing species. Without a ready supply, their essence would become clearly human, and they would be unable to hide anymore. They were running out of time, and had to find out how to harvest the dangerous bugs if they wanted to keep living here. Quite frankly, they couldn't exactly spare food for Shino, but they also couldn't stand by and watch him get killed for no good reason. When they stood in the way of the bug god, it hesitated about whether it was willing to crush allies in order to kill Shino. That was the only reason he managed to escape with his life. They also had to cover his body in crushed bugs to hide his presence. There was no expectation of intelligence from the bug god. It rarely moved except to harass their primary population elsewhere. But always, when it came back, it returned to the exact same place, so they never had to pick up and change their own location. So Shino took several weeks to recover, sharing his knowledge of bugs with the village leadership all the while. He understood their predicament now, and did not want them to succumb to what they called the bug god. There wasn't much in the way of education on the tailed beasts, but Shino could hardly think of what else that monster could be. He had never heard of beasts so large, and in fact, no one in the village had even encountered anything of such magnitude before. Not even close. He didn't like the idea of calling it a god either, but surely understood where they were coming from for thinking that. Shino also felt an awakening within his body after spending some weeks recovering, and discovered 5 of his beetles that had survived, or at the very least were born, in the time since his recovery. In the time he had to rest, he also had time to think. Perhaps because all of his bugs were left behind, his human chakra signal was recognized over the bug chakra signals that he would have otherwise had. By the logic of these exiles, he just needed bug chakra inside of him to mask his chakra scent, so to speak. So he started by imparting nearly all of his chakra to help his beetle population rebuild. If he could get a full population again, he theorized that their very presence would allow him to stop eating bugs and also keep him hidden from the monster. In fact, once he got his beetles back to fighting strength, he would then be able to figure out how to safely catch and kill the more dangerous bugs. The description given of all the different bug types in this area made Shino think about his little beetles. He thought the locusts that his father introduced to him were vastly superior to the little beetles at first. However, the beetles were very quick to adapt, to assimilate the qualities of other bugs. At the very least, much faster than his father's locusts. Until he found his way back home, Shino decided that staying behind so his beetles could integrate all the other survival mechanisms of the mutated bugs here. First thing he needed to do was test whether his bugs saved him from the detection of the monster bug. So he left the village of his own volition once he was fully recovered, emerged from the jungle at the riverside where he had first arrived, and looked up at the giant bug. Seemingly sensing his presence again, the monster bug looked back down at him as if it were meeting his gaze. It leaned in close, but instead of smacking him, it asked him a question. "What are you?" Shocked that it spoke, Shino told it that his entire bloodline have trained to be in complete symbiosis with bugs. The bug monster's head twitched back and forth a few times before it straightened again and completely ignored Shino. Nodding in silent victory of his assumption, and now sure that it was a tailed beast, Shino turned his back to it and looked into the depths of the jungle. Cracking his fingers, he began his work to make his beetles into better bugs than anything his family had ever seen. "I'm getting on a boat again?" Tenten complains, clearly perturbed by her last experience with one. Tired from the last few weeks, she removes the kiba blades from her waist and sits on a bench on the wall of the ship, sighing in exasperation. It had been so long since she had been able to rest properly like this in the safety of friends that she could almost fall asleep right then and there. Except that standing in a circle around her were Darwi, Omoy, and Samwi, staring at her. Samwi tells her that the cloud owes her a debt now, that if she ever needs a favor, she need only ask. Any time, any place. Smiling up at Samwi, Tenten thanks her sleepily. Darwi rolls his shoulders and reinforces Samwi's assertion. He tells Tenten that if it's within his power, he'll make it so. Thanks to Lady Tsunade for saving his life, he owes the leaf regardless. Though initially shaking her head at their offer, her eyes settle on Omoi, and she smiles softly. Noticing her gaze, Omoi comes closer and sits beside her, removing his own recently claimed legendary sword, so he too can sit comfortably. Looking between the three of them, but mostly at Omoi, Tenten sighs uncertainly. Picking up her Kiba blades, she explains to them her history with the swords. Omoi already knew this story, but she felt it was appropriate to share with Darui and Samui as well. She has immense sentimental value in the swords, because on her first mission ever as a ninja, she fought with one of the 7 swordsmen. And with the help of her teacher and fellow classmate, they were able to defeat the ninja. Eventually, she was rewarded with these blades. For all intents and purposes, she shouldn't have had them. It shocked her to her core that no one else in the village seemed to want them. She felt like they were willing the blades to her. And as a result, she always felt a little bit guilty for receiving them. She felt guilty not because they allowed her to have them. There was a substantial and continued gratitude on that front. No, she felt guilty because all this time, and even now, she still couldn't use them properly. Lightning isn't her inherent chakra nature, and though she has more chakra now than she thought she'd ever have, she just wasn't the right fit for the blades. She knew that now, though it took a while to figure out. It didn't matter how she trained, or where she trained, or under what master. She can wield the swords as well as any of the Cloud Ninja could wield a sword. But it was the other aspect of these lightning blades that she just could never nail. Pulling her legs up in her seat and kneeling beside Omoi, Tenten bows to him and asks him, pleads with him, whether he's willing to trade swords. Gently grazing her cheek with his hand and lifting her head, Omoi tells her that she doesn't bow to them. Even Samui and Darui are smiling down at her as Omoi freely places his sword between them. Without a question, it's yours, Omoi tells her, accepting the trade and offering their own spoils of war, Hiramakere. And that's the end of today's episode. Phew! Seriously, this one is heavily laden with information, despite Shino being in another weird place. Another weird place that either doesn't use chakra or uses a different word for it. And I must stress that just like Rock Lee's episode, you might feel like there's little information here, but there's not. I promise you that information brought up here is important to the overall story. We also got 2 revealed characters this time. Tenten is on a boat with some of our favorite Cloud Ninja. Yes, I hate to try pronouncing it again, but Hiramakere was a spoil of war for the Cloud Ninja. Why are these Japanese swords so hard to pronounce? Doubtless A will be furious to learn that they traded a legendary blade away, but by that same token, they were really appreciative of Tenten. What did she do to deserve such praise? A lot of people definitely tried predicting that Tenten would be a collector of the legendary blades, but that's not what she seeks. That's what Suigetsu wanted to do in canon so that he could reform the 7 swordsmen. But he's in that group in my rewrite, so what would his motives be then? And Hinata was discovered in the Land of Lightning. What's she doing over there? It looks like Neji's been chosen to help escort her back home. And you know what that means, right? It'll be a couple episodes yet, but all we have left are the 3 most anticipated characters of the lot. As much fun as I'll have making Tenten and Hinata's episodes, I can't lie. Naruto, Sakura, and Sasuke's episodes are going to be dynamite. But without further ado, the sky's the limit!